Welcome to logisticsexplained.com. Our guest today is Luke Sneddon from Satalia. So thank you very much for joining us today, Luke.
Thanks, David. Great to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Please tell us about your business, what it does, and where it fits in the supply chain cycle, please.
So we are Satalia. If anybody takes a look at us online, we're an AI technology house. We specialise in building and leveraging AI in the transport, supply chain and logistics space. We've got lots of experience in various areas in the supply chain. We've got final mile expertise, so we have an in-house built SaaS route optimization solution that we sell to customers in the final mile space. We do a lot in middle mile as well. We've been starting to look at sort of the execution phase of late with a driver app that we've built in-house that can connect to our final mile solution. And we also do a lot of sort of logistics consultancy services. So we'll go in and understand, problems that our potential clients are having in the sort of supply chain space and, end to end. And then we can do bespoke build work. So we do project work as well. So we've got a few sort of SaaS product streams, but we'll also do bespoke build work, leveraging the best in AI technology and talent that we've got in the business to streamline processes for our customers.
No, thank you. And I always ask the same question: what brought you into the lovely logistics sector?
So I think, if I'm honest, probably intrigue. Many years ago in the sort of early stage of my career, I'd been in various industries. I'd been in finance, HR and technology and sort of smart energy, but I was looking for something different. And, logistics had always interested me. I'm a bit of a nerd and was always thinking, well, how do these parcels, before it took off after COVID, how do these things actually make it to your house? What does that look like? I was a bit of a nerd about that. And then I got the opportunity, a few years ago now, because I've been in logistics for a while, with a 3PL consolidator business based in Glasgow, to go in and work with them. And then I've been in logistics ever since. I just find it, really interesting, really fascinating. No day is ever the same. I'm talking to customers and prospects and having different conversations about different pain points or different things they would like us to try and solve for them, every day, and then bringing that to life, with our engineering teams, some of the best talent that we've got, and then actually seeing it impact on the customer and, their supply chain, and then getting that positive feedback, I find really exciting and really rewarding. And, it's fair to say I'm probably addicted to it at this point because I've had, 3 or 4 different roles in the logistics space since I made that move. And I've been right across, from parcel to sea freight to sort of last mile deliveries with your own fleet. I've had great exposure to a lot of it. And I just find it very interesting, which, like yourself.
Yeah, and it drives UK PLC we all, as consumers, take it for granted, not criticise anything, we just take it for granted because we order something and it magically turns up. But when you get involved like you are, or I have, you realise how many potential choke points or error issues there could be, and it works so amazingly efficiently, even though things do go wrong. And then you've got outside influences like weather, politics, etc., etc.
The thing that sort of blew my head off recently, just when we've been talking to some of our customers, we've got a few customers in the sort of the grocery and the retail space, and understanding the volume of orders that they deal with on a daily basis, and then leveraging AI, what that then means in terms of computational options for routes. It's in the trillions in terms of potential route options, and it's something that a human just can't comprehend. We've had conversations with prospects previously, and somebody who's now a client with us. About 10 years ago, before I joined the business, we went and the team did an analysis with it, and they literally had a transport planner in their depot with a road atlas and then a spreadsheet of all the jobs for a given day, and then Luke would just plan the route. And I was like, that's highly inefficient. That was 10 years ago, and you think how it's evolved. And the power of technology now is incredible in comparison to even 10 years ago, in terms of what you can do. But people just don't realise, all the effort and all the thinking that goes on in the background to make sure, stuff ends up on a shelf in a shop, or it ends up at David's front door, on the day and the time that David asked for it. It's incredible what goes on in the background.
No, you're absolutely right. And the next question I normally ask is, how you see the business sector developing? But because obviously it's AI, and I'm intrigued, and I'm sure most people are. So how do you see AI developing over the next 3 to 5 years? And also, will it be really fast, or faster than we expect, or slower than we expect, in your opinion, Luke?
I think it can be a mixture of both. I think you've got a big sort of, it's not a misconception, but a lot of, senior leaders, think, right, if I put AI in, it's going to, drop my costs, do this or do that. And, it's like the silver bullet. It's not necessarily that, silver bullet that solves everything for you. It's there to complement and almost turbocharge your experience. So that's what I have, lots of conversations about in terms of, in this day and age when, customer demand is changing, it's ever evolving. Companies want to make changes to their network or their supply chain, but they want to know the change they make is going to have the impact that they want. At the moment, that can be, pure guesswork or planners locked in a war room scenario for like 3 or 4 weeks to get an output and churning through data. Leveraging AI to sort of do that shift from being reactive to proactive in terms of your supply chain planning is a big piece that I've been looking at and talking to prospects about. They want to model and understand, if I move, obviously I'm in Glasgow at the moment, if I close my Glasgow depot, if I've got 2 in sort of, further south in Scotland, maybe 1 in Edinburgh, can they take the load? Can we still satisfy the level of demand? Or if we open a new depot, what does that mean in terms of, slot propositions and things? And trying to leverage it from that perspective is one piece in terms of that modelling element to allow you to make, proactive decisions, that you have a better degree of accuracy on. Because at the end of the day, we've all got the data. This is a conversation I have quite a lot. Everybody gets excited. We've got the data. Then you've got all these fancy tools, but you don't know how to use it. If you can just understand the problem you want to solve, then you can go and model it, and you can do this in hours and then start changing some of the permutations, and that gives you a better idea. But then also embedding it into the sort of end-to-end process. So the actual real day, on the ground, Luke's van is out on the road, and we want to get, smart updates, through, say, the M25 shut because of an accident, for example, and I can see, Luke's route is due to touch the M25. Getting AI embedded in sort of that routing piece is a big piece that we're talking about at the moment in terms of being able to make changes to the route in real time. When I'm on the road, that then, re-renders the route, says, right, David, your order is going to be delayed because of traffic issues, but our estimate is now X. So it might have been 12. It's now going to be, between 12 and 1. And giving that real time, and that's ultimately getting driven by customer demand. We're very demanding. COVID has changed a lot. I think it's fair to say. I know it's 6 years ago now at this point when you think we first went into that lockdown, but that's changed their sort of buying patterns or behaviours and our expectation. And, a lot of that has been fueled by, almost, on demand. It's incredible from that perspective. So it's trying to help organisations move in that way that they can keep up with how things are changing.
Okay, yeah. And sort of following on from that, so what are the biggest opportunities and potential threats almost from AI, really, that will affect your sector, of course,
Yeah, so I think biggest opportunities is obviously it will allow you to streamline is probably not the word, but you can, get highly efficient in your processes.
Optimize, maybe, optimize.
Optimize is definitely the word. Both in terms of, your planning, your modelling, you can take, the opportunity if you don't know how to model very well or you need a niche skill set, if you do it manually, you can leverage the sort of technology with the AI there to then do that yourself. You can make those decisions far quicker. So that's going to enable businesses to be more sort of reactive to change, and be able to change with a measured approach, quicker. But also just being able to, optimize their operation. We see it, cost of living, rising costs in the logistics space as well. We have conversations, about how can we optimize, to be as efficient as possible, make sure we're utilizing as much capacity on the van, we're getting as much out of the shifts and the drivers. How can we do that without necessarily having to, increase our driver pool by, 50%, increase our fleet by 50%? How can we get more out of our existing estate is a big piece that we're working on with customers, and going, well, what does that look like, in 5 years, 10 years? You throw in the green transition as well. We're talking about customers that are looking at EVs. That's starting to take off, but it's sort of an unknown in terms of how can you achieve the same sort of metrics. I think that's the big piece in the next 3 to 5 years. I think is going to be that cost optimization.
And also you possibly can give a better customer experience as a byproduct, or manage the expectation of the customer fairly as well.
Yeah, that's the big, not the big challenge, but that's the big discussion point that sort of the customers and prospects will have with us. Is if we try and optimize it, can we still, keep our slot offering, in terms of if you're, hour slots or things like that? Can the customer still get that level of flexibility if we're going to try and push even more out of our current, setup? That's the big challenge, because obviously it's so market-led. If you don't have a strong proposition, you're going to get left behind. So that's the piece that I think scares people. Well, we want to try and maximise the efficiency in our fleet. Can we do that without harming, our reputation, which is ultimately what makes the money?
Yeah, because you want to sort of sweat your physical asset, but not affect the customer experience. It's a dilemma, that one, for everyone.
It's a huge dilemma, and we have some sometimes there is going to be occasions where the model might say you need to increase it by X, but then you can make an informed decision. It's not right, we'll just go and invest in a brand new fleet to complement our existing one and go, right, well, we think you might need to be strategic. You see high traffic in London and sort of the Midlands, right? So you can either move vans because, a depot in the northeast of Scotland is quite quiet. So you can shuffle your fleet, based on that and being able to do that planning. So it makes it more controlled from that perspective.
No, that's great. That's great. And, you are part of technology, but, the next question is how are the continual changes in technology affecting AI? And do you think I'm not sure that word, the capacity of AI will exponentially increase, as in almost bandwidth? I'm not sure the right word, to be honest, but will it increase?
I think bandwidth, or sort of the word would sort of be context. Sort of making AI, more context aware. It's something we talk about all the time in the business, about making it more context aware and getting it to the point that it can just be, it functions as a brain almost at the moment, with some control points, that the customer can keep control of. But could you get it? Can we get it to that point where it is literally making the decisions and acting like a human element? I think that's the scary piece. That's where people think it's something like, the Terminator movies and things like that, when it's fully autonomous and making those decisions. But say we're always looking at, what's the next piece? What's the next bit of the jigsaw that we can add in? Because the real bit that we're looking at the moment is that whole feeding in real time, traffic data, or how can we get AI to analyze, David normally with his business goes, right, the doorstep time, the delivery time for any order is going to be, 6 minutes. We've got customers going, right, well, how can we optimize that? How can we figure out if that's the right thing, and then take into account, all the conditions that cause you to be late or quick? But there's huge opportunities. And I think it feels like it's boundless, in terms of the art of the possible. It will definitely disrupt it, further in the next 3 to 5 years, I would suspect, which can be quite a scary prospect for transport planners, especially when we talk to them and go, well, it doesn't necessarily, everybody goes to, well, if we put this fully automated process in and then we're just reviewing it, we're going to lose our job. But it's not. What it allows them to do is we're big on it. It turbocharges your experience, so you've got lots of knowledge. It's there for you to harness and give a better slot. We give a better proposition to your customers. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose your job, which I think is what a lot of people get caught up in. In some places it might, but that's obviously a business decision. But we're sort of big on it. It's there to complement existing process and help turbocharge it and make you more accurate, ultimately.
And because what I've done in my career, you sort of become a studier of people. And one thing I've learned is that people like change when they're driving it. When it changes them, they're not so keen. And we're, as human beings, we're all the same. So I can totally understand that. What are people in the sector not talking about that they should be talking about?
So I think the big bit, I probably touched on it in one of the earlier questions that we spoke about, is sort of that shift from sort of reactive to proactive, supply chain planning. Everybody gets excited. I think, as I mentioned, we've actually got, all the data that we need. We spend a lot of time doing sort of data exercises with clients and going, right, you have actually got, the data set, and just teaching people to understand you've got the data at your fingertips, to then be able to harness, an AI model to go and model things. It no longer needs to be guesswork, or, you've got to plan, we're working with customers, for like Christmas peak. Some of our customers are sort of grocery retailers, as I mentioned, and they were like, before we use you guys, we're spending 6 months doing all the planning, making sure we've got enough capacity and things like that. Whereas, using the system, you can model it, in hours, throw a data set from the year before at it and see what happens. So I think it's making that shift and accepting, sort of embracing AI to do that is a huge piece, because we know, capacity is constrained. We hear it all the time in the logistics world. Capacity is tight, especially if you want to take on a new account, and figuring out if you can take on that new account without degrading your service, but also given the level of service you expect to give to the customer. That's a huge piece at the moment, in trying to understand, can you accept new customer profiles, and being able to do that sort of proactive modeling is a huge piece that I think will help speed that up.
And is there maybe a lack of, maybe nervousness or a lack of trust? Because once you've used it 4 or 5 times, you trust something. But when you've got like a new client or predicting peak for a logistics company, that is high risk strategy, because if it goes right, no one notices. But if it goes wrong, everyone talks about it. So is there a resistance to trust, not a resistance to change, but a resistance to trust?
Yeah, I think there's a resistance to trust the output. For sure. As you say, once you do it 4 or 5 times, it's like riding a bike, and then you do trust it, because we see that challenge quite a lot when you've got people that have been in the industry for 20, 30 years as a planner, and they're still resistant or skeptical of, oh, it can actually come up with a better route than what I can do in my head. We have that debate quite often. So I think it's that piece, because it's still it is the buzzword, as we were talking about earlier. It's still the buzzword, using AI, leveraging technology to do decisions. It's a scary piece. You've always been used to being in control. So we spend, a bit of time sort of with clients and prospects just to try and overcome that hump, and just explain to them what it really means for you, and trying to show the value up front, and using, scenarios, use cases that we've done before, and just taking people through it and trying to break that resistance early. Because if you can do that early, it's going to be far more productive. But I think it's just human nature, right? It's a new sort of technology to leverage in an industry that has, let's be honest, we've seen quite a lot between us. It's worked in a certain way for a long time, and it's worked. But obviously the shifts in consumer demands mean that the businesses need to think differently, and starting to leverage things like AI in your supply chain is going to help do that without a huge cost.
Yeah. And how do you see the green transition affecting, I suppose, what you do for customers? Might be the best way of asking that question.
Yeah, so that's having huge impact. We're starting to have conversations with clients that have started to invest in electric fleets. Because obviously I do a lot in the final mile space, but the same in the middle mile and across most of the sort of verticals that we speak to. We're speaking about the green transition, and understanding what that means for them on the ground. We've sort of done a basic sort of build into the product to handle, EV vehicles, with the limited range capabilities and things like that. But we're obviously now starting, ranges are getting bigger, and obviously infrastructure is lagging behind a little bit, but we're starting to talk about with the clients, what does the overall package look like? What else do we potentially need to plug in? So we're doing lots of research in the background to think what is the proposition to move it forward, and talking directly with clients. I think a lot of it still feels a bit of an unknown across the board, because it's still in its infancy. It's fair to say, if you're trying to run longer distances. I think we've got clients that run EV on small scale in sort of London, small areas where your start stop on an EV is probably better. But understanding how you can embed that across your network, where you might be delivering to the far north of Scotland, for example, from Inverness or Aberdeen. Could I still use an EV? Because obviously it has benefits, but just understanding what that means to their network. And it comes back to the same thing that we were talking about earlier. If we make that transition, can we still offer the same slot proposition? Can we still fulfill the same number of orders? What does it actually mean for the customers at the end of the day? Because it's a big leap. It's almost like embracing AI, that change to EVs, hybrids, whatever. It's an interesting one, because there's not a lot on the big scale that do it yet. So it's a big leap for clients, and we're spending a lot of time with them just to look at metrics, costs, what things would you potentially want to optimize on when you're running an electric fleet, which is completely different to just running a diesel van, which is very interesting and sort of in its infancy, but I think it will be quite exciting as this starts to grow.
Thank you, Luke. And what developments in the sector have surprised you most during your career?
I think the biggest one, so as I mentioned, starting my career, I also joined sort of a 3PL that was in the parcel world, which was pre-COVID, and then was still there during COVID, and obviously saw, you know, the demand take off for home deliveries. From that perspective, you know, and the strain that puts on networks, and you know, I think at that point, you know, could a UPS or a DPD or whatever accept a new customer under the COVID times was a big challenge. But certainly over the last few years, and even with some of the customers we work with, is sort of the rise of, you know, the convenience option for customers. So the click and collect concept, or lockers, in the last few years has exploded. I remember seeing, you know, when I was out, you know, doing the walks during COVID and just seeing some of them pop up. And I was like, this seems interesting. And obviously Amazon did it. But, you know, over the last few years, that's been incredible. And that gives flexibility both to the businesses and to the customers in terms of convenience. You know, it's cheaper for me to run a van and deliver 60 parcels to, you know, a couple of lockers than it is to deliver it to 60 doors ultimately. And the customer gets more convenience. I think that's been, you know, a big shift in the last few years from I want it delivered to my house and I want a specific time range to, well, I'm quite happy to go to the local supermarket or the local garage or whatever and pick it up at a locker, and I've got 3 days to do it. So I think that's evolved, and we've seen that on the ground with some of our clients. You know, some that work in the grocery world and retail. You know, they've obviously enhanced their offering, predominantly in the click and collect space, and some with lockers, and it's accounting for over 50% of their daily volume now. So that switch from being predominantly home delivery driven to more, you know, click and collect or locker driven has been huge. You know, I didn't expect, when I was speaking to a client about it and just understanding, you know, we're modeling it, we're sending it here and there, but what does the actual demand look like? And when they said, yeah, we're over 50% going to click and collect, so getting delivered to the store network, I thought that was incredible, because I think everybody thinks, you know, you still see all the vans in the housing estates, and they think that's still the big piece. But for some retailers, it's now actually swinging in the other direction, where that convenience option is generating a lot more traffic.
No, thank you. And the final question I'll ask everyone: if you could speak to the government, then what would you ask them to do to help your business grow and flourish?
So I think a big part of it is obviously to help us and help anybody in the logistics sector is trying to remove the barriers. You know, some of the red tape, some of the overhead to embrace new things, or, you know, encourage, you know, research grants and things into AI. Obviously, we do a lot in the space ourselves for an AI technology house, but trying to encourage that and just removing the barriers, making it easier for companies to adopt AI. You know, it's a scary piece. You know, there's lots of experts in the world, but it's a new technology. You know, so it's still in its infancy, so to speak. I think in being embraced, just to speed up the innovation. And I think that the big piece that I'm quite big on, I think, is providing more assistance to support that green transition. That's a big piece. You know, I think there needs to be more investment in the infrastructure. That's the big challenge that we have discussions with customers at the moment, is, you know, if we want to try and plan, you know, a charging break on the road for a van and stick it in a rapid charger, and, you know, it charges in half an hour. How do we plan that in? And I just don't think the infrastructure has caught up with the ambition yet, which I think is constraining the growth in the green transition, if I'm honest.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Luke. It's been lovely to hear your views, and I'm sure we've all learned a bit more about AI, hopefully. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, David.